Good morning, Heritage. My name's Lindsay Clemons, and some of you know me as the Angel of Doom, who sometimes comes and talks to you guys about all of the ways you can get in legal trouble. But that's actually not why I'm here today. I was asked to talk to you about essentially what a typical day in the life of an attorney in Columbus might look like. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about all of the different types of things that I do. And also, I want to give you an idea of some of the different things that you can do if your path is leading you on the way to law school. So, first of all, I started my own law firm in January. Perfect timing, I know. And so my practice is really different from what I did before. I used to work for the DA's office, the district attorney's office, as a prosecutor, and I did that for 13 years. And I worked primarily in circuit court, and my job was simply to prosecute all felony crimes that occurred in Lowndes County, Oktibbeha County, Clay County, or Noxubee County. That's known as the 16th District. But there are a lot of different courts in Mississippi and in Columbus. And now that I'm in private practice, I actually do a little bit of work in all of them. So I want to go through some of that with you guys. First off, there's youth court. Youth court is under the umbrella of Lowndes County Court here. And the judge that presides over youth court is Judge Allison Kaiser. And I know you all know Judge Kaiser. I am one of the attorneys who works for Judge Kaiser in youth court as a parent representative. So youth court is split into sort of two areas. One is delinquency, which is when young people, such as yourself, who are not yet 18, commit crimes and are brought before the court. Youth court is private. It is a sealed courtroom. Everything that happens there is secret. It's not open to the public, mainly because most of the time when kids get in trouble, it only happens once and they move on with their lives, and we don't want their lives ruined by everyone finding out that they were in trouble. So that's one part of what youth court handles. The other part is called CPS court. CPS is the Child Protective Services Court. And essentially, the Department of Human Services and their agency CPS, Child Protective Services, sometimes remove kids from homes because their parents either abuse them or neglect them. What I do in youth court is I am a court-appointed attorney, and I represent parents whose kids have been removed by CPS. So that is a government job. It's a part-time job. It's a very part-time job. CPS days are once a month. Sometimes we schedule more than one day a month if there are so many cases and we have to go over. But generally, it's one day a month. And we handle hearings where the county is making a case for removing kids from custody. And it's my job as a parent representative to make sure that the parents know their constitutional rights, and also to help walk them through the process, because it's very intimidating. It's very distressing because they're there because their kids have been removed. Usually those cases involve neglect as opposed to abuse, which is good. The abuse cases are much more rare, but often that neglect stems from drug use. So we may have cases where the police are called to a house, and in one instance, the officer was speaking to a parent who had called the police because someone had broken into the home. And when the officer got there, he saw evidence of drug use around the house, and there was a broken meth pipe laying in a doorway, things of that nature. And so they called CPS and the kids were removed. And the goal of youth court is to reunify families. And so it was my job to represent this parent and let them know that they needed to do all of the things that were required by CPS in order to be reunified with their kids, like get assessed for drug treatment, go to drug treatment, successfully complete drug treatment, that sort of thing. So those are intense days, and there's a reason they're only once or twice a month. First of all, because the volume isn't that big, which is very good, but we do have a lot of cases and it's very draining work. So that's part of what I do. One day a month, I'll be in youth court all day representing parents in cases like that. Another court that we have locally is Chancery Court. Mississippi is actually one of only 2 states that still has Chancery Court. In other states, all of their courts are sort of combined into something like circuit or superior court. But in Mississippi, we separate what essentially is family court into Chancery Court. So Chancery Court hears matters of relating to wills and estates, family law, any kind of divorce or child custody, and any kind of adoptions would be in Chancery Court. So in a small practice, in a small town, you do a little bit of everything. So I may be in youth court one day and the next day down in Chancery Court representing, for example, grandparents. Mississippi is a state that allows for visitation by grandparents. So I had a case earlier this year where a couple came to me and they were being kept from their grandchildren. Their case met the conditions that would allow for them to petition for grandparent visitation. And so we filed a lawsuit asking that they be allowed to visit with this grandchild. And after we had a hearing in Chancery Court, they were granted visitation every other weekend, which is unusual. In this case, their child, the parent of the grandchild, is no longer around. And so they were essentially given what would have been that parent's visitation if they were around. So that was fantastic. They see that grandchild every other weekend now and often send pictures of all the fun activities they're doing together. So that's the type of case you might handle in Chancery Court. Others are obviously divorce. The pandemic has not been terrific for marriage. So I think a lot of time spent together has led folks to realize that maybe staying married is not for them. So there's an increase in divorce cases, unfortunately. And that's another type of case that we handle. Another court in this area that you have municipal and justice court. Both of those are courts that handle misdemeanors. Municipal court really is just another name for city court. So the city of Columbus has the Columbus Municipal Court, and they handle all misdemeanors. And misdemeanors are crimes that carry only up to 1 year in jail, in the county jail. Anything that carries more than a year in prison is considered a felony, and that would be handled in circuit court. But if you run a stop sign, if you have a small amount of marijuana, you might be arrested and charged in municipal court. If you're in the county and outside the city limits, you're going to be in justice court. So I have had cases in the last 9 months, 10 months, 11 months. What month is it? It's November already. So in the last 11 months, I've handled cases in municipal and justice court. The most notable this year, I had a client who was charged with a DUI. He had pulled off the side of the road over in another county and had been awake for several days. He was someone who suffered from bipolar, and he was having a manic episode, and he had been awake for several days. And when he was driving back home from Tupelo, he realized he was really, really tired. And instead of crashing off the road, he pulled off on the side of the road to sleep, and he was woken up by the police. Somebody had called the police and said there was a distressed motorist. When they got there, they woke him up. And from their perspective, he was disoriented. He wasn't making any sense. And they assumed that he was under the influence. And so they arrested him and charged him with DUI other because he didn't have any alcohol in his breath. So they assumed he had taken some kind of substance. Well, they never took his blood. They never took any kind of blood test. They just charged him with a DUI. And in Mississippi, if someone doesn't have alcohol in their system, you have to prove that they're under the influence of another substance. And you also have to prove that their driving is impaired. So because they had not actually observed him driving, and because they had not tested his blood, we were able to get that DUI dismissed, which I'm pretty proud of. So that was handled in justice court because it happened in the county, actually in Clay County. Then you have circuit court. In circuit court, they handle all felony cases for criminal court and any lawsuits that you can seek restitution above a certain amount. So class action lawsuits, products liability lawsuits, med mal lawsuits. I don't handle any of those. The only things I would be doing in circuit court these days would be criminal defense. So I sometimes represent people in circuit court. My husband, Josh, is a public defender. That's another area of law that one can practice in a small town. In Mississippi, there are only 2 full-time public defender offices. One is in Jackson, the other is at the coast. I think it's in Biloxi or Gulfport, which means that everywhere else in the state, public defenders, which are attorneys that are appointed to represent criminal defendants who cannot afford an attorney. So I'm sure some of you have seen TV shows where they talk about the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. That is a public defender. Everywhere else in the state in Mississippi, if you're outside of Jackson or the coast, public defenders are local attorneys who are appointed by the court as public defenders, but it's a part-time job, which means they all are in private practice on the side. So I have actually 2 law firms right now. One is with my husband, Josh, the Clemons firm. He's a part-time public defender. So up in circuit court, he's representing people who can't afford an attorney in their felony criminal cases. I do a little bit of private criminal defense work, which is the same thing that Josh does, only there are people who can afford an attorney. Josh also does some private criminal defense. So sometimes people hire him on cases, sometimes he's appointed. People hire me on cases. And we represent criminal clients in criminal cases, which is the exact opposite of what I did before I went into private practice. I was a prosecutor. So the prosecutor is the attorney on the other side who works for the district attorney's office and represents the state in prosecuting people charged with crimes. Over the years as a prosecutor, I tried a case once where someone decided to represent themselves. They did not hire a lawyer and didn't want a public defender. And the court ordered that the public defender sit with this individual at counsel table so that if they decided they had some questions and wanted some actual legal advice, they could get it. But otherwise, they represented themselves. And it was a shoplifting case, and it happened at Kroger. And it was pretty straightforward. I mean, the staff at Kroger had seen this person getting various items from around the store. I mean, everything from meat to shampoo and soap to, I think he even got a bottle of milk, if I remember correctly. But they followed him around the store as he shoved stuff in his pants. And then when he passed the registers and was heading out the door, they stopped him and he ran back inside the store and started putting everything back, thinking, I guess, that they wouldn't prosecute him. But unfortunately for him, the crime of shoplifting is committed when you leave and go past the last register without paying, because that shows your intent to not pay for those items. So anyway, they chased him around the store. They finally got him, and he did his own closing argument at trial. And he started off by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I've been stealing for my entire life." And I can't tell you vehemently enough, first of all, if you ever find yourself on the wrong side of the law, go ahead and let a lawyer help you. Public defenders are fantastic. They're in court all the time. They know what they're doing. Take their advice. If you are stubborn and decide not to, do not lead off your closing argument by talking about how long you've been stealing. Not effective. It took the jury, I think, 8 minutes to find him guilty. So don't do that. The flip side of that sort of case, I've been in the courtroom when someone's sentence was overturned because DNA evidence cleared them from a crime they had been serving time in prison for. And that's a really incredible, intense experience. And that would only happen up in circuit court. I said a minute ago that I have 2 law practices. The other is Clemons Woodard Closings, which is a business I have with a heritage parent, Stephanie Woodard, and we handle real estate closings. Real estate closings in Mississippi require a settlement agent, and they're almost always lawyers. And so it's my job to get together all the paperwork relating to a real estate transaction, and also to provide something called a certificate of title, which is where we go into the vault at the Chancery Courthouse in the Chancery Clerk's office and essentially trace the ancestry of a piece of land. Who owned it before it was being sold? Who owned it before that? Does anybody else have a claim on this property? Are there any liens? Is there anyone who says that the homeowner owes them money and that they can file a lien with the clerk's office? So the government files liens. If you don't pay your taxes, they'll file a lien against your property, which means you can't sell your property without paying them back whatever you may owe them. And so it's part of my job to go and research land records and go through, and sometimes that involves looking up wills from the past. Sometimes it involves going on the Secretary of State's office if a business owns a property to ensure that the person selling the property is actually the title holder to that property, which I feel like some of you are already glazing over. And as criminal attorneys, we're a little bit spoiled by high drama, where someone charged with armed robbery runs out of the courthouse and is tackled by deputies in the parking lot, which has happened. But real estate's actually pretty high drama as well, because you're dealing with a lot of emotion. People have a lot of emotion tied up in their home, and you're talking about a lot of money. So those two equal a lot of high drama. So I'll give you an example. I had a client who was a woman. She had purchased a house by herself. She was married, but she had used essentially, I think, inherited money or her own money to buy this property. Her husband's name was not on the property, and they were getting ready to sell it. After she bought the house, they had moved into the house and lived there for several years. And what she didn't realize was that by moving into the home with her husband, she had converted her personal property that she bought and paid for, and her name was on the deed, into marital property by living there with him and by filing for something at the tax assessor's office called a homestead exemption. Again, if this is boring you, it'll be over in a second. Don't worry. But she had unknowingly converted this property into marital property by those actions, which how would she know that? Nobody tells you that when you buy a piece of property. But what that meant was that when it came time to sell it, not only did she have to have her husband sign over the new warranty deed, but there was one of those tax liens I mentioned earlier, where the husband had neglected to pay some income taxes years before, and the IRS had filed a tax lien saying, no, this property can't be sold unless you pay us back. So that was pretty high drama, because not only she wanted to handle it herself, she considered it her investment property, but so not only did her husband have to get involved and okay the sale, but the amount of money she thought she was going to be receiving was greatly reduced by this tax lien. And it was my job as the settlement agent, the real estate attorney, to figure all that out, to discover all of those things. And it's tricky business. So that is fascinating, a fascinating part of my practice. And that's actually the majority of what I do these days. And I love it. It's great. But there are any number of things you can do as an attorney. If you are living in a small town and you're in private practice, you're going to do a little bit of everything. There's generally not enough of one type of law. So you may end up doing some divorces, criminal defense, lawsuits, any number of things, a little bit of everything. But one of the terrific things about being a lawyer is that you can do anything in any field. There is a place for a lawyer in any area. So really the key is to figure out what you're passionate about, what you like, and what you're good at. And you can find a role for an attorney in any of those areas. So if you are really interested in business, Any major corporation will have an in-house attorney, in-house counsel, general counsel, they're sometimes called. And they handle all of that company's business. So you could work for a Fortune 500 company. You could work on Wall Street as an attorney for the SEC, ensuring that those big Fortune 500 companies are following all of the government regulations. You can be other types of government attorneys. The legislature has attorneys. If someone runs for public office, House of Representatives or state Senate, that really can be anyone who runs for those offices. They go down to Jackson and they are charged with writing laws. Well, it's safe to say most of them don't know how to do that. And so there are attorneys who work for the state legislature, and it's their job to advise those politicians on whether or not what they're trying to do is constitutional or allowable, or whether it may lead to unforeseen lawsuits and that sort of thing. You can be an FBI agent. Almost every FBI agent in this country is an attorney first. The Department of Justice needs lawyers. The SEC, I mentioned them earlier. The FAA, there are lawyers who work for those agencies. If you're really into sports, every sports agent, just about every sports agent in this country is a lawyer. I have a friend who has one of the coolest jobs. She used to be the in-house counsel for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now she's an attorney for the NFL. She loves sports. She has always loved football. She went to law school and found a job doing something that she's passionate about. The NCAA has attorneys, the NFL, the MLB. I mean, all of those groups have attorneys. Entertainment. Actors and actresses agents are attorneys. The big production houses, the production companies all have in-house counsel. You could work for a nonprofit. If you're passionate about the environment, you could go find a job with a nonprofit. If you're passionate about things like the Innocence Project, you could work for the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a nonprofit. You could, like I said, work on Wall Street. You could work for one of the big firms that does class action lawsuits, which is really where all the money is. But you could become a litigator, and you could become an attorney with a goal toward being on the court. All of our judges obviously are attorneys. They all started as attorneys. Think big. Think big and really think about what you love, because you can find an area of law to match your passion if it's something that you're interested in. If any of you have any questions or you want to know more, you can always contact me or another lawyer that you know. We're always willing, ready, and able to help people who want to go into this line of work. You will have to endure a lot of jokes about how you should go to medical school or some other thing. Everyone always seems to think the grass is greener on the other side. But being a lawyer is really interesting, no matter what area of practice you prefer. No matter what your personality type, you don't have to enjoy public speaking. There are a lot of introverts who make fantastic law clerks. Law clerks work for judges, Supreme Court justices, the legislature, and their job is to research and write. When I met my husband, he was a research attorney up at Ole Miss. Mississippi has something called the Mississippi Legal Research Institute, and it's under the umbrella at the Mississippi School of Law up in Oxford. And it has a lot of sub-agencies. And when I met my husband, he was an attorney for the Mississippi Alabama Sea Grant Legal Program, which until I met him, I did not know that was a thing. But his job was to research and write articles about developments in water law issues, because he studied environmental law and has an environmental law certification from his law school. And his job, aside from writing articles and researching, was to advise cities and states and counties about those developments in water law. And he loved doing that. So if you follow your passion, you can never go wrong. Again, I appreciate your time. Gosh, it's been almost 25 minutes. So if you're asleep, wake up. It's over. And if any of you have any questions, feel free to contact me. My office number is 662-242-7014. Or you can reach me at Lindsay, Lindsay at clemonslaw.org, or Lindsay at cwclosings.com. I haven't had enough coffee yet, to be honest, but thanks for your time. And if you were awake the whole time, I hope that you learned something. And if you want to go to law school, holler at me. I'll help in any way I can. Like I said, you can intern here, or I can point you in the direction of people who do the type of law you might be interested in. Thanks. Stay healthy.